The forgotten daughter. They called me the forgettable daughter, and for the longest time, I believed them. Growing up, I was the quiet one, always in the background, whilst my siblings shone like polished brass. Sarah, the golden child, effortlessly charming and destined for greatness in their eyes. And then there was David, the athlete, all brawn and easy smiles, the one who could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was just there. Our father, a man of considerable wealth built from the ground up, always seemed to look right through me. He'd pat my head absently, ask me about school, but his gaze never lingered. It was as if he couldn't quite place me in the grand tapestry of his life. My mother, bless her gentle soul, tried to compensate, but even her love felt like a balm on a wound that never truly healed. I threw myself into my studies, finding solace in books and a quiet satisfaction in mastering subjects that seemed to elude my more flamboyant siblings. Whilst they were out partying, I was buried in textbooks, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. It wasn't about proving them wrong, not then. It was about proving something to myself. After university, I drifted, taking on odd jobs, never quite finding my footing. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of my own life. Sarah was climbing the corporate ladder, David was a local sports hero, and I was answering phones and making coffee. The news of my father's passing hit me harder than I expected. Despite our strained relationship, he was still my father. The funeral was a blur of polite condolences and forced smiles. My siblings embraced me, their grief seemingly genuine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The reading of the will was a formality, or so I thought. I sat quietly in the back, expecting nothing, prepared for nothing. Sarah and David sat in the front row, radiating an air of entitled anticipation. The solicitor cleared his throat, and the words that followed shattered the last vestiges of my naivete. A small sum, a pittance really, was bequeathed to me. The bulk of the estate, the business, the properties, all went to Sarah and David. The silence in the room was deafening. I could feel their smug satisfaction radiating towards me. They had won. They had successfully erased me from the narrative, relegated me to the footnotes of the family history. But they were wrong. They had underestimated the quiet girl in the corner. They had failed to see the fire that burned beneath the surface, the ambition that had been simmering for years, waiting for its moment to ignite. They thought they were done with me. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. They had given me the greatest gift of all, a reason, and I was about to show them what a woman scorned was truly capable of. But first, I needed a plan. And I knew exactly where to start. The disappearance. The first thing I did was disappear. Not literally, of course. I simply withdrew. I stopped answering Sarah's calls, avoided David's awkward attempts at small talk. I needed space, time to process, to strategize. My tiny inheritance, barely enough to cover rent for a few months, felt like a cruel joke, but it was also a seed. A tiny, insignificant seed that I intended to cultivate into something magnificent. I spent days holed up in my small flat, poring over legal documents, researching business strategies, and devouring biographies of self-made millionaires. I learned about hostile takeovers, leveraged buyouts, and the art of negotiation. The world of finance, once a distant and intimidating landscape, slowly began to reveal its secrets to me. My father's company, the one Sarah and David had inherited, was a sprawling conglomerate with interests in everything from property to manufacturing. It was a complex beast, but I knew its weaknesses. I knew the departments that were underperforming, the contracts that were vulnerable, the employees who were disillusioned. I had listened, observed, and remembered, even when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I started small, investing my meager funds in a series of calculated risks. I bought undervalued shares, flipped properties, and even dabbled in online marketing. Each success, no matter how minor, fueled my determination. I was building something, brick by brick, from the ground up. I also started building my network. I attended industry events, networked relentlessly, and sought out mentors who could guide me. I learned to play the game, to speak the language of power, to project an image of confidence, even when I was trembling inside. One evening, whilst attending a particularly stuffy gala, I ran into an old acquaintance of my father's, a seasoned businessman named Mr. Thompson. He remembered me, surprisingly, as the quiet one who always had her nose in a book. We struck up a conversation, and I subtly steered it towards my father's company. I mentioned, almost casually, that I had some ideas for improving their bottom line. Mr. Thompson, intrigued, invited me to lunch. That lunch turned into a series of meetings, and soon I was consulting for one of my father's company's biggest competitors. I was feeding them information, insights that only someone who knew the inner workings of the company could possess. It was a dangerous game, but I was playing for keeps. I knew that Sarah and David were starting to notice the shift in the market. They were feeling the pressure, scrambling to maintain their position. They had dismissed me as a nobody, a non-entity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The pieces were falling into place. The game was on, and I was ready to win. I could feel the thrill of the hunt coursing through my veins, the satisfaction of finally taking control of my own destiny. But this was just the beginning. The real confrontation was yet to come, and I knew it would be explosive. The confrontation. The whispers started subtly. A dropped comment at a family gathering. A questioning look from a distant relative. Sarah and David, initially dismissive, were now visibly on edge. I could see the anxiety etched on their faces, the way they'd huddled together, their voices hushed and frantic. They knew something was happening, but they couldn't quite pinpoint the source. And that, I realized with a grim satisfaction, was the beauty of it all. My consulting work with their competitor was yielding remarkable results. I'd identified key inefficiencies, streamlined operations, and negotiated favorable contracts. The competitor's profits were soaring, whilst my siblings' company was struggling to keep up. The market share was shifting, and the balance of power was slowly but surely tilting in my favor. One afternoon, I received a call from Sarah. Her voice was tight, strained. "We need to talk," she said, her tone devoid of its usual saccharine sweetness. "Can you come to the office?" I hesitated for a moment, savoring the anticipation. This was it, the confrontation I'd been waiting for. "Of course," I replied, my voice calm and measured. "I'll be there in an hour." As I drove to my father's former headquarters, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Anger, resentment, but also a strange sense of vindication. I was about to walk into the lion's den, but this time, I was the lion. Sarah and David were waiting for me in the boardroom, their faces grim. The room felt sterile, impersonal, a stark contrast to the warmth and familiarity I remembered from childhood. They sat at the head of the long mahogany table, their positions of power clearly defined. "What's going on, Fapun protagonist?" David demanded, his voice laced with irritation. "We've been hearing things, rumors, about you consulting for Sterling Enterprises." I raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Sterling Enterprises? I'm not sure what you're talking about." Sarah slammed her hand on the table, her composure finally cracking. "Don't play coy with us. We know you're working with them. We know you're feeding them information about our company." I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. "And what if I am?" The silence that followed was thick with tension. David stood up, his fists clenched. "You're betraying us. You're betraying our father's legacy." "Legacy?" I scoffed. "What legacy? The one that conveniently excluded me? The one that deemed me unworthy?" "That's not fair," Sarah interjected, her voice trembling. "Father always cared about you." "Cared? He barely acknowledged me," I retorted, my voice rising. "I was invisible to him, to both of you. You basked in the spotlight whilst I toiled in the shadows. And now you expect my loyalty? You expect me to stand by and watch as you squander what he built?" David stepped closer, his eyes blazing with anger. "This isn't about loyalty. It's about family. You're hurting us, and you're hurting the company. The company that you inherited unfairly," I corrected him. "The company that you're running into the ground." I stood up, my gaze unwavering. "I'm not hurting the company. I'm saving it, by showing you what it's truly capable of, by forcing you to confront your own incompetence." "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I paused, savoring the moment. "I want what's rightfully mine. I want recognition. I want respect. And I want you to understand that underestimating me was the biggest mistake you ever made." I turned to leave, leaving them speechless and defeated. As I walked out of the boardroom, I knew that this was just the beginning. The battle was far from over, but I had drawn first blood. They had forced me to play their game, and now I was about to rewrite the rules. I had a plan, a daring and audacious plan that would shake them to their core. But to execute it, I needed leverage, and I knew exactly where to find it. A secret, long buried, that could unravel everything they thought they knew about our father. The hunt for the truth was on, and I was ready to dig deep. The hunt for truth. The secret I was after wasn't something readily available in company ledgers or public records. It was a whispered rumor, a hushed conversation I'd overheard years ago, during one of the rare moments my father let his guard down after a few too many whiskeys. A name, a place, a forgotten investment. It was a long shot, a threadbare clue, but it was all I had. My search began in the dusty archives of our family solicitor, Mr. Abernathy, a man who'd known my father since before I was born. He was a cautious, meticulous individual, not easily swayed by emotion or sentiment. I presented my request as a matter of historical interest, careful not to reveal my true motivations. He eyed me suspiciously, but eventually, after much persuasion and a hefty retainer, he agreed to grant me access to the relevant files. Days turned into weeks as I sifted through mountains of documents, my eyes burning, my back aching. I felt like an archaeologist, painstakingly excavating the past, searching for that one elusive artifact that would unlock the mystery. Just when I was about to lose hope, I found it. A file, tucked away in a forgotten corner, labeled Project Nightingale. Inside were documents detailing a clandestine investment my father had made decades ago in a small, obscure technology company. A company that, according to the records, had gone bankrupt shortly after. But something didn't add up. The numbers were off. The timing was suspicious. There were coded memos, hidden accounts, and a series of transactions that defied explanation. I knew instinctively that this was it. This was the secret my father had desperately tried to bury, the truth that could unravel everything. But I needed more evidence. I needed to trace the money, to uncover the paper trail that would lead me to the truth. My investigation led me to a small, unassuming town in Switzerland, a place known for its discreet banking practices. I booked a flight, determined to follow the trail wherever it led. The moment I stepped off the plane, I felt a sense of unease, as if I was being watched. I checked into a small, family-run hotel and immediately set about my task. I visited the local bank, posing as a researcher, and requested information about the accounts linked to Project Nightingale. The teller, a stern-faced woman with piercing blue eyes, was initially reluctant to cooperate, but after a subtle display of my own financial leverage and a promise of future business, she relented. The information she provided was explosive. The funds from Project Nightingale hadn't disappeared. They had been funneled into a series of offshore accounts, ultimately landing in the hands of a mysterious shell corporation. A corporation that, according to the records, was controlled by none other than Sarah and David. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own siblings had been complicit in my father's deception, profiting from his shady dealings whilst I had been left in the dark. The betrayal cut deep, fueling my anger and strengthening my resolve. I knew then that this wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about justice, about holding them accountable for their actions, about exposing the truth, no matter the cost. I had the evidence, I had the motive, and now I had the opportunity. I returned to the hotel, my mind racing, and began to formulate my next move. I needed to find a way to expose Sarah and David's complicity, to reveal the truth to the world. But I also knew that they wouldn't go down without a fight. They were powerful, ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. As I sat there staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape, an idea began to form in my mind. A daring, audacious plan that would not only expose their crimes, but also reclaim what was rightfully mine. I would use their own greed against them, lure them into a trap, and watch as their carefully constructed empire crumbled before their eyes. But to execute this plan, I needed an ally. Someone I could trust, someone with the skills and resources to help me navigate the treacherous waters of corporate espionage. And I knew just the person to call. An old friend from university, a brilliant hacker with a penchant for mischief. Her name was Emily, and she was about to become my secret weapon. But first, I had to convince her to join my cause, and I knew that wouldn't be easy. The alliance convincing Emily wasn't as difficult as I'd imagined. It only took mentioning secret Swiss accounts and our university's name to rekindle the flame of rebellion that had always defined her. "Who are we robbing?" was the first thing she asked without even a hello. I explained the situation, omitting the more sordid details about my family, focusing on the injustice and the need to expose the truth. Emily, with her faded pink hair and a crooked smile, loved the idea. It's like a spy film, only with more family drama. I adore it. We met in a rundown cafe near the train station, a place that seemed to have stopped in time. Emily, with her thick-rimmed glasses and a laptop covered in stickers, seemed out of place amongst the elderly playing dominoes. But beneath the eccentric appearance, I knew she was a force to be reckoned with. "Right, tell me everything," she said, typing frantically on her keyboard. Names, numbers, dates. The more information, the better. I poured out everything I'd discovered about Project Nightingale, the offshore accounts, the Shell Corporation. Emily listened intently, her fingers flying over the keys. "This is dirty," she commented, with a gleam in her eyes. "But I love a good challenge." The following weeks were a whirlwind of codes, firewalls, and data tracking. Emily moved into my small flat, transforming the sitting room into an improvised operations center. We slept little, ate poorly, and breathed bits and bytes. But we were obsessed, determined to unmask the truth. Emily managed to trace the money to a bank in the Cayman Islands, a place known for its financial opacity. We discovered that Sarah and David were using the Shell Corporation to launder money and avoid taxes, building a parallel empire at the expense of my father's company. "I've got something for you," Emily announced one night with a triumphant smile. I managed to access their emails, years of correspondence, planning, confessions. It's all here. We read the emails together, our eyes wide with the extent of the betrayal. Sarah and David had known about Project Nightingale from the beginning. They had conspired with my father to hide the money, and they had benefited enormously from it. One email in particular caught my attention. It was a message from Sarah to David, written shortly before the reading of the will. "Don't worry about her," it said. "She's not a threat. She'll be content with the crumbs." Rage washed over me like a tsunami. They saw me as insignificant, incapable of fighting. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Time to put the plan into action," I said, my voice steady. "Let's show them the true meaning of crumbs." Emily smiled, her eyes gleaming with enthusiasm. "I'm ready. What are we going to do?" I had an idea. A bold move that would involve the company's board of directors, the press, and a public revelation that would leave Sarah and David with nowhere to hide. It was risky, but it was the only way to ensure the truth came to light. "We're going to plant a story," I explained, detailing my plan. "We're going to use the media to create irresistible pressure on them. We're going to turn their secrets into headlines." Emily agreed, her fingers already typing furiously on her laptop. "Let's start spreading the news. They won't know what hit them." The first part of the plan was to leak information to an investigative journalist I'd known for years. He was a skeptic, but I knew that, with the right evidence, he wouldn't hesitate to publish the story. I sent him an anonymous email with a link to an encrypted file containing Sarah and David's emails, the banking documents, and information about Project Nightingale. "The truth is here," the email said. "You decide what to do with it." We waited anxiously, biting our nails, imagining Sarah and David's reaction when the story was published. We knew it was only a matter of time before the world discovered the truth about them, and we were ready to see the house of cards crumble. But I knew the real battle was yet to come. The explosion. The following morning dawned with deceptive calm. I prepared strong coffee whilst Emily monitored the news websites, awaiting any sign. The tension was palpable, the silence only broken by Emily's frantic typing. Suddenly, a muffled scream. "I've got it!" I rushed to her side. On the screen, the headline blazed, "Family Scandal Engulfs Billion-Pound Company, Swiss Secrets and Stolen Inheritance?" The article, accompanied by scanned documents and email excerpts, exposed all the sordidness of Project Nightingale. Sarah and David were in trouble. The phone rang. It was the journalist, his voice urgent. "Your story is explosive. The board is already in uproar. Sarah and David are denying everything. But the pressure is enormous. I smiled. The trap was set. Let the pressure build, I replied. Truth always finds a way. The following hours were chaos. The news spread like wildfire, dominating the news and social media. My father's company's reputation, once untouchable, was tarnished. Share prices plummeted. The board of directors, once loyal to Sarah and David, demanded explanations. I knew my next move needed to be precise. I needed to present myself before the board, armed with irrefutable evidence, and demand what was mine by right. I rang Mr. Abernathy, the family solicitor. I need an extraordinary board meeting, I said, and I need your presence. Abernathy hesitantly agreed. He'd always been a man of principles, and the revelation of Sarah and David's crimes had shaken him profoundly. The following day, I dressed in an impeccable suit, choosing each accessory carefully. I wanted to convey an image of strength and determination, a woman who wouldn't be intimidated. Emily accompanied me to the building's entrance, wishing me luck with a tight embrace. The meeting room was packed. The board members, with their scowling faces and suspicious looks, watched me enter. Sarah and David sat at the head of the table, their faces pale and tense. "What are you doing here?" David hissed, his voice laden with hatred. "I'm here to claim what's mine," I replied, my voice firm and clear. "I'm here to expose the truth about Project Nightingale and about how you've squandered my father's inheritance." I began presenting my evidence. Each document, each email, each bank statement, meticulously organized. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of my voice and the rustling of papers. Sarah and David tried to interrupt, deny, deflect attention, but it was too late. The truth had been revealed, and they had nowhere left to run. At the end of the presentation, the room was in shock. The board members, with their pale faces and incredulous looks, turned to Sarah and David, demanding an explanation. Abernathy stood up, his voice trembling with indignation. "I worked with your father for decades. I never imagined you'd be capable of such betrayal." The vote was unanimous. Sarah and David were removed from their positions, and I was appointed interim CEO of the company. The room exploded in murmurs and exclamations whilst I remained impassive, absorbing the victory. But I knew the battle wasn't completely won. Sarah and David were still a threat, and I needed to protect myself. Moreover, my father's legacy was still tarnished, and I needed to find a way to restore his reputation. The next stage would be the most challenging of all, dealing with the consequences and rebuilding the empire. But I was ready. After all, I had a plan. And this plan involved an old friend of my father's, a man who knew the darkest secrets of the family, and I needed to find him. The search for Victor. Finding this old friend of my father's, the man who held the family's darkest secrets, became my priority. His name was Victor Martel, a lone wolf who had severed ties with everyone years ago. People whispered about him, as if mentioning his name aloud might summon him from the shadows. I began my search in the dusty files of Abernathy's office, sifting through old contracts and outdated correspondence. Victor had been a close partner of my father's, a confidant, and, from what I could deduce, an accomplice in some of his more questionable decisions. But at some point, something had happened, a rupture that separated them and made him disappear from the map. After days of relentless searching, I found an old address, an isolated chalet in the Swiss mountains. It was a shot in the dark, but I had nothing to lose. I organized another trip, this time without Emily, feeling that this journey required a more personal approach. The chalet was even more isolated than I'd imagined, nestled amongst snow-capped peaks and dense forests. Snow was falling in thick flakes, creating an atmosphere of mystery and melancholy. I hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. The silence was deafening, interrupted only by the wind's howling. Finally, the door opened, revealing a thin, wrinkled man with piercing eyes that seemed to read my soul. "Victor Martel?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He observed me for a long time without saying a word. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "Come in, I was expecting you." The chalet's interior was Spartan, with dark wooden walls and antique furniture. A fireplace crackled in one corner, casting dancing shadows over Victor's face. He indicated a chair and sat opposite me, his eyes fixed on mine. "I know who you are," he said, his voice hoarse and tired. "The forgotten daughter, the one who was left behind." I swallowed hard. I know about Project Nightingale, I replied, without beating about the bush. I know you were involved. He wasn't surprised. Your father was a complicated man, he said, sighing. An ambitious man, willing to do anything to achieve his goals. And you helped him, I retorted, my voice laden with accusation. He nodded. I was young, naive. I believed in his idealism, in his vision of a better future. But I soon discovered the truth. He was a master of manipulation, using people as pieces in his game. Why did you distance yourself? I asked. Why didn't you denounce him? He looked away, as if reliving a painful moment. I tried, but he had too much power, too many allies. He would have destroyed me. So I chose exile, preferring to live in the shadows rather than become a victim. I need to know the truth, I insisted. Everything. About Project Nightingale, about the secret accounts, about what really happened. Victor hesitated for a moment, as if pondering whether he should trust me. Finally, he took a deep breath and began to speak. He told me about the project's early days, about the promise of revolutionary technology that could change the world. He told me about the money that flowed freely, about the secret agreements and obscure maneuvers. And he told me about the moment he realized my father had strayed from the path, that his ambition had consumed him. He was obsessed with power and wealth, Victor said. He didn't care whom he hurt, as long as he achieved his goals. He told me about the Shell Corporation, about how it was created to divert funds and avoid taxes. And he told me about Sarah and David's role, about how they were accomplices in the entire charade. Your father was preparing them to take control, Victor said. He taught them to lie, to cheat, to manipulate. They were his protégés, his heirs. Hearing his words, I felt a mixture of rage and sadness. Rage at having been deceived, at having been used. Sadness at having lost my father to greed and ambition. Is there anything else? I asked, my voice almost inaudible. Any secret you haven't told me yet? Victor looked into my eyes, his gaze laden with a weight I couldn't comprehend. There's one last thing, he said. Something your father never wanted you to know. Something that could change everything. He paused, as if gathering courage to reveal the truth. Project Nightingale wasn't just about money, he said. It was about power. It was about controlling the future. And with those words, Victor Martel revealed a secret so shocking it threatened to destroy everything I believed to be true. The revelation left me stunned, unable to speak or move. I needed time to process the information, to understand the implications. But I knew that from that moment on, my life would never be the same. The ultimate revelation. The silence hung in the chalet, dense and oppressive. Victor's revelation echoed in my mind, distorting reality around me. Controlling the future? The phrase sounded like a science fiction film cliché, but coming from him, it carried a sinister weight. What do you mean? I managed to ask, my voice choked with disbelief. Victor sighed, a tired sound that carried the weight of decades of secrets. Project Nightingale began as a promise of technological innovation, yes, but it quickly transformed into something far more ambitious. Your father didn't just want to create new technology. He wanted to control it. He wanted to use this technology to influence politics, economics, society. He wanted to mold the world in his image. He explained that the technology in question wasn't just software or hardware, but something far more disruptive, a form of advanced artificial intelligence, capable of analyzing data on an unprecedented scale and predicting human behavior with frightening accuracy. My father intended to use this AI to manipulate the masses, to control public opinion, and ensure his interests were always served. He believed he knew what was best for the world, Victor said. He saw himself as a visionary, a savior, but he was blinded by his own arrogance. The revelation made me feel sick. My father, the man I'd always believed to be merely an ambitious businessman, was actually a megalomaniac, a potential despot, and Sarah and David, his protégés, were continuing his dark legacy. Where is this AI? I asked, fear gripping my chest. Does it still exist? Victor nodded. Yes. It's hidden, protected by firewalls and security codes that not even Emily could break. But it's there, waiting to be activated. He explained that the AI was stored on a secret server, located in an underground bunker somewhere in Switzerland. Only a few people knew of its existence, and Sarah and David were the only ones who had the key to access it. Are they planning to use it? I asked, feeling panic take hold of me. Victor looked into my eyes. I don't know. But I know they're capable of anything. They're like your father, obsessed with power and control. I needed to stop them from using this AI. I needed to expose their plans and destroy it once and for all. But how? I had no resources, no allies, and Sarah and David were powerful, ruthless. What do? I asked Victor, feeling lost and desperate. How can I stop them? Victor looked at me for a long moment, his wrinkled face expressing a mixture of sadness and determination. I'm going to help you, he said. I'm going to give you the tools you need to fight. He explained that over the years he had collected information about Project Nightingale, documents, photographs, recordings. He had hidden everything in a secret safe, waiting for the day when someone could use them to expose the truth. This information could be the key to destroying Sarah and David, Victor said. But you must be careful. They'll fight with all their might. They won't give up the power they so desperately crave. He led me to a corner of the chalet and removed a loose floorboard. Underneath was a metal box, rusty and dusty. Victor opened the box, revealing a treasure trove of dark secrets. Use this wisely, he said, handing me the box. The world's future may depend on it. I took the box, feeling the weight of responsibility fall upon my shoulders. I was no longer the forgotten daughter, the woman who lived in the shadows. I was the only one who could prevent Sarah and David from unleashing this AI upon the world. I left the chalet, snow falling gently on my face. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the mountains. I breathed deeply, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. I was frightened, but I was also determined. I wouldn't let my father and his protégés control the future. I would fight with all my strength to protect the world from their unbridled ambition. But before putting my plan into action, I needed to return home. I needed to reconnect with Emily, to tell her about the AI and ask for her help. Together, we could defeat Sarah and David and destroy Project Nightingale once and for all. As I walked back to the car, I felt a chill down my spine. I knew I was being watched. Sarah and David probably already knew I had found Victor. They were probably planning to stop me from using the information he had given me. I needed to be cleverer than them. I needed to anticipate their moves and be prepared for anything. The war was only beginning, and I was ready to fight. But before facing my enemies, I needed to visit an old friend. A friend who, unknowingly, possessed the key to one of the family's greatest secrets. And I knew this revelation would change everything.